Right, okay, so we've just had an absolutely cracking bourbon from Heaven Hill, and now we're going to have potentially a cracking rye from Heaven Hill. Heaven Hill seem to have quite a lot, don't they? So again, this other one was also from Michael Bradley, who in between doing the last whiskey and this one, still haven't managed to find any contact with him, so I can't remember how we got in touch, but he sent through some samples, and I am very, very grateful for them. So this particular one, Rittenhouse Rye, I was struggling to find some detail on, to be perfectly honest. Googling it didn't really bring up an awful lot. What I could find about it was either just tasting notes, or there is a Rittenhouse Rye. They do a Rittenhouse Rye 100 proof, which apparently won San Francisco North American Whiskey of the Year a couple of years ago, and it's like less than $30. So it's very, very highly regarded. They have a 21, a 23 and a 25-year-old, of which is this, whatever. So this particular one, so this is from a distillation during 1984, and it was bottled, part of it was bottled as a 21-year-old, then another part of it was bottled as a 23-year-old, and then the final amount of casks were bottled as a 25-year-old. Now this was 38 barrels worth, totaling 3,000 bottles. So there's not a lot of this around at all. Very, very highly regarded. Again, like I say, from Heaven Hill, but this is, the backstory behind this is a little bit odd. Doing some research on it, and a couple of comments from the guys on Facebook were saying that apparently this is in a style called, and I'm going to have to look at it, Monongahela. I think that's how you pronounce it. If you Google Monongahela, you don't really get an awful lot, even if you do Monongahela whiskey. Monongahela is essentially a region in Pennsylvania, and I think it ties together with what I found out. If you just Google Rittenhouse, there's a various kind of like Rittenhouse store and this and that and the other, but there is a Wikipedia page about a guy called William Rittenhouse, who was a German emigrant that spent some time in Holland and then emigrated to America and settled in a place called Germantown or Germantown in Pennsylvania. And he had worked in Holland in a paper mill, and actually opened a paper mill in Pennsylvania. And he is actually recorded as the first person to use paper in some form or another in the USA. Now this was in 1688 that he came across to America, so this is a long time ago, but this is kind of his claim to fame. So there is actually a Rittenhouse Square in somewhere in Pennsylvania, I can't remember where it was now, but somewhere in Pennsylvania there is a Rittenhouse Square named after him, because the paper mill was owned for at least a century. It was family owned. So it's a name that's got heritage, and this Monongahela style of whiskey was actually pre-prohibition. Pennsylvania was actually quite a big region, maybe not Kentucky size in terms of where we are now with Kentucky bourbon, but Pennsylvania was a pretty core region for producing whiskey, and Monongahela was a region in Pennsylvania that became known a bit like Kentucky is known for Kentucky bourbon, which kind of separates it from other bourbons around America. Monongahela whiskey became regarded as a type of whiskey that people started asking for. Now it seems to be predominantly rye and aged in cask for probably a couple of years. Aged as opposed to other types of whiskey that was around in the time, which were either kind of like moonshine or like thrown in a cask for transportation, and that was it. That was the amount that you got. Whereas Monongahela appears to be, from what I can figure out, a bit more of a sort of more aged, higher quality, bit more of like the equivalent of a super premium whiskey over here. So Rittenhouse Rye. Now, from what I have read in one report, was that this is actually a combination of US and Canadian rye, and the wash itself is actually slightly sort of heavier than most, so you end up getting a thicker spirit that's distilled up. There's quite a rich colour on that as well. That was almost like syrupy when I poured it out. So this is released at 50%, and like I say, this is Heaven Hill. So this is essentially a type of whiskey that's has been like a Pennsylvania style of whiskey that Heaven Hill have basically kind of gone, okay, we'll try and make that. We'll try and do this type of whiskey. Like I say, the standard 100 proof is very highly regarded. I haven't been able to source it, so I'm going to take this as my Rittenhouse, and essentially this is kind of a treat for me, over and above the standard one. This is what the bottle looks like, and Master of Malt were selling the bottle for about 185 quid, probably 150 bucks in America if you can find it, because it's limited numbers, and like I say, this is sort of premium stuff. So I'm very, very lucky to have this. Wow. There's almost... See, the first thing that popped into my head was ink. And it's a slightly petrol-y feel, but it's like... Yeah, and it's starting to turn into sort of felt tip pens. That sort of... the real sharpness of now Sharpies don't smell, but sort of like cheap felt tip pens where you get that sniff, and it's a real kind of like nose clearer, but slightly, oh, I don't want to sniff this too much because I'll start seeing things. There's that in there, but then there's like super concentrated, like really, really intensely concentrated grapes and damsons and raisins, but like ultra concentrated, but it's slightly petrol-y as well. It's a really unusual nose. There's some leather in there as well that like you keep picking stuff up every time you sniff it. Yeah, there's kind of leather, but new car leather as well, and new car leather as well as really old leather and old furniture, and now it's just turned into fresh garden mint. I could be here all night just smelling it. Right, let's go for it. Jesus Christ. So it starts off, and it's almost, it starts off in a really, really rich mouthfeel, almost like a syrup, like maple syrup. And then all of a sudden it fizzes. It fizzes on your tongue and it fizzes around your mouth. And that's probably the 50% alcohol. And then it turns again into like a really, really soft licorice. And again there's that super concentration of fruit. And it's not even specific. It's not blackcurrants or plums or raisins. It's a super concentration of every fruit you can find, because I can taste banana in there, I can taste apple and pear, I can taste blackcurrant, I can taste raisins. Just any fruit. Pick a fruit and you can actually pick it up in this. That's something else. There's a petrol element in there as well, but a petrol element can sound off-putting, but this supports everything. And you can get like white wine Riesling, where a petrol element is actually a key component of that flavour. There's so much going on. It's almost indescribable because it's kind of got everything. I'm reluctant to put some water in, to be perfectly honest. Now the Parker's that I just had was 48% and I felt it needed water. I don't think this needs water. I don't think it's absolutely necessary. Part of me is tempted to. I'm probably gonna, I'll take one more sip and then I'll add some water to it, just to see whether it releases a lot more. But the intensity of flavours on this, and it keeps going, it doesn't finish, it just carries on and on and on. There is so much to that, it's untrue. It really is a remarkable, remarkable whiskey. Quite a few of you probably heard me bang on about the Ardbeg 1977, which is my all-time number one whiskey, the one that got me into whiskey, the one that made me aware that one drink could have so many different flavours in, and it just kept on going and going and going. One of the advantages of the Ardbeg 77, I used to say, was the fact that because there's so much flavour in it and the finish goes on for so long, you don't actually need to drink as much of it. You don't need to put as much in your glass when you're drinking it, because it lasts for so long that you can take a sip and just leave it for 5 minutes and you're still tasting it and you're still enjoying it, and then you can take another little sip. So a bottle lasts for ages. This is up there with that complexity and finish and flavours that are evolving and changing within your mouth. And you don't need a lot of it, but it will last a long time. That's unbelievable. That really is an astounding whiskey. That is something else. Right, water on this one. To be honest, it doesn't need the water. I've got a little bit left in that. Supposedly, that's 3cl in there. And I definitely had 2.5cl, so you'd think there would be left in that. I'm saving that one. That's one for afterwards. That's one for when I finish the challenge. I'm going back to that. That is an unbelievable whiskey. That's amazing. That's up there, top 10, easy. Still taste it now. I'll probably still taste it about half an hour's time. That's mind-blowingly good. Amazing stuff. Yeah, I cannot fault it. Honestly, the percentage, alcohol percentage, almost perfect. Doesn't need to be any less. I certainly wouldn't do it anymore. But it doesn't need to be any less. Yeah, the amount of flavours in that is incredible. For a non-peated whiskey, I tend to find peated whiskies tend to have more to them, because you've got like a whiskey element and then this additional peated element on top that gives you a bags more. That has so much concentration of fruit, like I say, banana, apple, pear, raisin, there was chocolate in there, there was nuts in there was petrol, there was honey, there was maple syrup, there was just so much stuff going on. You know, even just on the nose, it's incredible. Absolutely unbelievable. 180 quid at Master of Malt. Get it at that price. That's cheap. That is worth it. That's mind-blowingly good. So Michael, again, many apologies for losing the communication that we had, because I now want to get back in touch with you and thank you for that sample, because that absolutely didn't need to be sent to me. It ticks Rittenhouse off, but to have had that is actually an honour, because it's amazing stuff, unbelievable stuff. Right, on that note, I think it's probably time I should get on with going to bed. But yes, Rittenhouse Rye, 25-year-old. If you can find it anywhere, get it. It's amazing. I shall see you at the next one. Cheers.